Welcome to Building Brawl. This is a wildcard guide to help you smartly build a great collection for Arena Singleton and build a good card collection for Eternal Singleton down the road or Eternal Brawl whenever it becomes available on Arena. Basically, if you have a few extra wildcards laying around and don't know what to spend them on, snatch these cards up first. And we are talking about some of the best black spells for Arena. So let's go and jump into it. And one of the best things that black is known for is removal. Two of the best removal pieces that you can start running in your Singleton decks are going to be Price of Fame and Vraska's Contempt. With Price of Fame, it's going to cost 2 less if it targets a legendary creature. So if we are building for this eventually some sort of Eternal Brawl format on Arena, this is going to be the premier removal spell going into the future. Then at the end of the day, 4 mana to destroy a creature and to get a Surveil, so that's always nice. So, you're always looking to get that reduced cost, but if you don't get that reduced cost, you're still getting that Surveil for 2, which kind of makes up for it. Then if you do get that reduced cost, you still get the Surveil too, and that's feels pretty good. One of the best removal spells is going to be Vraska's Contempt. I don't know, it just always feels good to get that destroy a creature and get the Surveil. The other one's going to be Vraska's Contempt. Exile target creature or a planeswalker, you gain 2 life. I cannot tell you how many times, 4 mana may seem like a lot, but the fact that we can exile a creature or planeswalker and you gain that 2 life, typically that really does help you out if you're playing an aggressive mono black deck or some sort of green black deck. Getting that extra 2 life really kind of puts you in that range of, whew, okay, that feels better. Like I can hopefully kind of stabilize a little bit more. I don't know why that 2 life, but it does make a difference. And being able to exile a creature and gain a little bit of life, you always want to get some sort of 2 for 1. That's why Price of Fame is so good. We get to destroy a creature and get some card advantage. Same thing with Vraska. Exile a creature or planeswalker and get that 2 extra life. It does make a difference in a Singleton format like this. Now, moving on to the next removal, that's going to be something like Cast Down and Murder. Destroy target non-legendary creature, so that will kind of catch you off guard a few different times. But the fact that you have a 2 mana removal spell, highly recommend picking this one up. And Murder, this is going to be your 3 mana universal removal spell, destroy target creature. So you definitely want to pick both of these up. These are going to be the removal staples going into the future. Now, one of the cool things that black does is it has some sort of sacrifice effect. It cares about sacrificing its creatures. So we have Vicious Offering and Severed Strands. With Vicious Offering, it's going to keep us on the same theme with the removal, but we have to sacrifice a creature. So we can simply just use it for -2/-2, which on its own, that's pretty good. But if we sacrifice a creature, it's going to get -5/-5 until end of turn. Let's say we have our deck set up in a way that we can take advantage of creatures dying. That's going to be a great way for us to run some sort of sack outlet and at the same time deal with our opponent's creatures. With Severed Strands, we do have to actually sacrifice a creature to cast this, and then we gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. Then we get to destroy target creature and opponent control. So, like I mentioned, 2 for 1 is always kind of nice. So with Severed Strands, a little bit of a kind of a clunky spell, especially if they can counter it. But you sacrifice a creature, you gain some life, and then you get to destroy a creature. So it's kind of like this weird mixing pot of value. So definitely worth it to run when there's not a ton of removal options in there. We also have some kind of 3 converted mana cost removal within Arena. Exile target creature with power 3 or less. Having instant speed removal and having the exile effect is really important because there's a lot of different ways that you can recur stuff out of the graveyard, so being able to exile something, just get it rid of out of the game, that's always nice to have. Then also Vanquish of the Weak, destroy target creature power 3 or less. This is situational, but if you're playing black, you're going to run a lot of removal in here. These are the options that we do have. So Vanquish of the Weak at 3 mana, really good to get that down. Now we do have Walk the Plank, that is double black. It's a little kind of little bit hard to run it in certain decks that, especially if you're just splashing black. But destroy target non-merfolk creature, that's pretty much going to catch a ton of creatures, and especially once this Singleton format kind of goes away from standard and eventually kind of builds into this Eternal format, Walk the Plank will very much be like Victim of Night, and then it's pretty much going to catch a ton of stuff for 2 black mana. But that's the only downside. It is sorcery speed and double black, so it's going to kind of constrain you on what sort of deck you want to put it in. But going into the future, this will definitely be one of the better pieces of removal. There's also Necrotic Wound. It has Undergrowth. Target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X the number of creature cards in your graveyard. If it would die, then you get to exile it. Now, you do have to do a little bit of setting up with this card, but if you care about having creature cards in your graveyard, let's say that you're running Aristocrats, you're running Golgari, Necrotic Wound's a great way to get some really cheap removal for only 1 total mana. Now, the other thing that black is really good at, and that's going to be card draw. So we have Argyl's Bloodfast. This is a great thing to get down on turn 2. Pay that 2 mana activation, pay 2 life, and draw a card. If you're new to Magic, one of the best things to keep in mind is that your life total is a resource. As long as your opponent's life total gets to 0 and you're above 0, it doesn't matter if you're 1, 2, 3, or 4. Doesn't matter. As long as your opponent goes to 0, that's what matters. So being able to pay two mana, pay 2 life to draw a card, that's going to help you get to the card advantage that you need and find the cards that you need to answer some of your opponent's threats. Then, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 5 or less life, you get it to flip into the land that sacrifices creatures and you gain some life. Most of the time, you're going to keep it on there to gain that 2 life, to pay 2 life to draw a card. But there's going to be certain situations where you may want it to flip to sacrifice a creature to gain some life. Whenever you do it, I don't know, it always feels really good because it feels like it's going to help you out. We also do have Dark Bargain. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 2 of them in your hand, other into your graveyard, and then deals 2 damage to you. Like I mentioned, your life total is a resource, so you want to be aggressive with getting your card advantage going. And the fact that it does help you kind of push some sort of graveyard strategy, that is always nice. And it's instant speed, so you can kind of flash it in at the end of your opponent's turn, kind of leave up some removal, then get some card advantage. That way you're ready to go whenever your next turn rolls around. Now, keeping on theme with the card draw, we have Blood Divination. This is 4 mana. You do have to sacrifice a creature, but this is a really nice effect. Sack a creature, draw 3 cards. You're going to be able to draw cards as quickly as possible in black. In Blood Divination definitely helps you do that. Let's say you're running Reassembling Skeleton, sacrifice Reassembling Skeleton, draw 3 cards, then bring back a Reassembling Skeleton. He's all happy. You get to draw 3 cards. You're happy. Everybody's happy. Liliana's Contract. Now, this may seem like kind of a weird card draw source, but for its value, it's really good. 5 mana, enters the battlefield, draw 4 cards, and you lose 4 life. So right there, in Singleton, being able to draw cards quicker than your opponent, that's what matters. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more demons with different names, you win the game. There's a lot of good demons in black, and so to kind of have this alternative win condition, you don't necessarily have to build a Liliana's Contract deck. Let's say that you just kind of end up in Magic Christmas Land where you're just playing Liliana's Contract to get some card draw. You get that down, get that card draw. Next thing you know, you have Demon Lord on the battlefield. You have Demon of Catastrophes. You have a couple more demons. You can win the game right there. So it's nice to kind of have these kind of win conditions that are not necessarily like game plan A or game plan B, but they're more like game plan D or E. And if you hit it, awesome. So that's kind of what Liliana's Contract is. At number 8, we have this kind of situational card draw. So we have Costly Plunder. As additional cost to cast Costly Plunder, we have to sacrifice an artifact or a creature, but we get to draw 2 cards, which is always good. And then Sword Point Diplomacy. This is one of those cards that it's kind of like a Punisher effect. Reveal the top 3 cards of your library. For each of those cards, put that card in your hand unless your opponent pays 3 life, then exile the rest. Early game, your opponent's going to be pretty aggressive with paying their life total, so that's going to really kind of set you up to go for some really nice kind of closers, some finisher creatures. Late game, it's pretty much always going to be 3 cards in the hand if your opponent's sitting at 6 or less life, 9 or less life. They're not really want to pay that life, so it's a great way to kind of, in mono black, attack your opponent's life total early game, and then late game, kind of refuel our hand for only 3 mana. Is a little bit of a situational effect where if your opponent can pay it, they'll definitely make sure you don't get the card that you want. But being able to still, kind of put card draw on the table and your opponent's life total on the table is really good. Now, moving on to board wipes. Black really wants to get some sort of board wipe. So we have Ritual of Soot. Destroy all creatures with converting mana cost 3 or less. There's not a ton of good board wipes, but this is what it is. So we have 4 mana. Unfortunately, it's not going to catch a lot of the big finisher creatures from your opponents, but having some sort of board wipe, you definitely want to run them in your arena decks. And also, Phyrexian Scriptures. Put a +1 counter up to 1 target creature. It becomes an artifact. Then destroy all non-artifact creatures. So we do kind of have like a 4 mana, 2-turn board wipe, but at the same time, you can kind of keep your big creature on the battlefield. Let's say you're running Yargle. I don't know, it's always fun to do this Yargle. So you get on Phyrexian Scriptures, put a +1 counter on that creature, it becomes an artifact, you destroy all the other creatures. Now you have Yargle that's 10, you can swing in and deal some damage. Then with the last 3 mana, the third chapter, exile all cards from opponents' graveyards. That's going to allow you to kind of clean it up. So there's no graveyard recursion out of your opponent's graveyard. So it's always nice to kind of have one-sided board wipes. If you can have one-sided board wipes in Arena, which Phyrexian Scriptures is definitely that really kind of helps you close the game out. Now, not necessarily board wipes, but we have a few different cards that really kind of put some pressure on our opponent's creatures. We have Golden Demise. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Then if you have the City's Blessing, only your opponent's creatures get -2/-2. This is going to be a great way to really deal with a lot of your creatures' mana dorks, a lot of their tokens, and a lot of their utility creatures. You're looking at a lot of 2/1s, 1/2s, different things like that. So for 3 mana, that's really going to allow you to kind of wipe out your opponent's creatures. And also with Vapors, all creatures get -1/-1. 1. That's going to allow you to clean out their mana dorks and the tokens, but let's say that you can't really wipe out a ton of creatures. The fact that it does have Surveil for 2, that's still going to give you some sort of extra value out of the deal, which is always nice to kind of run that in a deck. There's also Vana's Hunger. This is one of those effects that is really nice. So let's say that your opponent gets their creature out, their commander out, you go for Vana's Hunger, you're going to make them sacrifice a creature. Once you have the City's Blessing, you can make each creature sacrifice half their creatures rounded up. So that's a great way to, let's say you have a really nice board state developed, you have the City's Blessing, you go for Vana's Hunger, you're going to make your opponent sacrifice half their creatures. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to swing in. There you go. Now, one of the good things that black is really good at is that's tutoring cards. So we have a couple different options of that. This could be Mastermind's Acquisition. I'm not entirely sure how you can grab a card from outside the game. I don't know how that works with Arena. But the main part is we have a 4-mana tutor. Search your library for a card, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. When you're playing a Singleton format, you definitely want to run some sort of tutor effect. That way you can find the exact answer that you need for the given situation. Worst case scenario, you're simply just grabbing a board wipe to help you kind of stabilize and get some sort of extra stuff going on the battlefield. And then also Final Parting. This is kind of a nice 2-for-1 tutor. Search your library for 2 cards. One card's going to go into your graveyard, and then one card goes into your hands. So this is a great way to, you can go for some sort of big reanimated creature, put that in the graveyard, grab your reanimator spell. If you want to grab something else, pretty much world is your oyster. You can do whatever you want. The fact that it's a 2-for-1 tutor for 5 mana definitely kind of helps kind of push it up into the tutor scale. Now, we do have Mausoleum Secrets. This is kind of a little bit more of a situational tutor, but it's nice to have access to it. Search your library for a black card requiring mana cost less than or equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, then put it into your hand. This is a very situational card, but in the right deck, this can be really good. You do have to search your library for a black card, but it doesn't say it has to be mono black, so you can grab a Vraska Planeswalker. If you're playing a deck that cares about creatures going to the graveyard, let's say you're building an Aristocrats deck, you have a lot of creatures in there. It does take some building requirements for your deck to run this card in there, but for 2 mana instant speed tutor, pretty good. And also Liliana's Spoils. This is technically not a tutor. It's just kind of more of like a value, more of like a value engine. Target opponent discards a card. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You get to reveal a black card, put it in your hand, the rest on the bottom in any order. So basically for 4 mana, you're going to be able to get some card advantage and make your opponent discard a card. So not necessarily tutor, but it's a great way to kind of dig a little bit deeper into your deck. Now, the other thing that black is really known for is going to be hand disruption. So target opponent reveals their hand, choose a non-creature non-land card. That's a great way to grab their early game planeswalkers or any sort of removal that they may have. Divest is another good hand disruption option. Target player reveals their hand, and you get to choose an artifact or a creature card. So once again, you don't have to run a ton of these hand disruption stuff, but running in this a 1-for-1 format, being able to trade a Duress very early on for something like Teferi is more than worth its weight in gold, and especially with something like Divest. If you can trade a Divest for something like a Plaguecrafter or some sort of good utility creature, you're doing pretty good. Now, we do kind of puts us into this 3-mana hand disruption spot. This is kind of cards you may not want to run, but if you need some sort of hand disruption, they are available. Dark Inquiry, target opponent reveals their hand, choose an online card, they discard that card. So that's going to keep us a little bit more open as far as what we want to grab. And then Never Happened, choose an online card from it. And then with Never Happened, they reveal their hand. Also, you get to kind of exile something out of the graveyard. So it's a little bit more of a utility Never Happened spell. Hand disruption for their hand and their graveyard, kind of keep you open on either way. Now, one of the things that black is also really good is that's reanimating stuff out of the graveyard. So we have Yawgmoth's Vile Offering, which is such a cool card. Put up to 1 target creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard onto the battlefield and show up to 1 target creature opponent or planeswalker controls, then exile Yawgmoth's Offering. So this is a legendary source, so you do need to have a legendary creature on the battlefield, but having a 2-for-1 in Singleton format is worth its weight in gold. The fact that you can bring back a planeswalker or a creature and destroy one of your opponent's creatures or planeswalkers, really cool effect, and plus flavor-wise, it's just really awesome to kind of imagine that happening. There's also Rise from the Grave. This is your standard reanimator spell. 5 mana, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It is a black zombie in addition to its other types. So now with Rise to the Grave, the one thing to keep in mind is that it says from a graveyard. So you can grab your opponent's creatures or you can grab your creatures out of the graveyard. Either way, you have a full buffet of dead creatures to put on the battlefield on your side. One of the cool things that black also does is kind of mass reanimations. We have Gruesome Mana Green. If you're building some sort of aristocrats, this is going to be your mass reanimator spell. We get to choose a creature card, we convert it, make us 1, 2, and 3, and then return it to the battlefield. This does require some sort of deck building constraints. It's pretty much just going to be in kind of your aristocrats or utility builds, but having access for 5 mana to bring 3 creatures back on the graveyard is really nice. Then also Boneyard Parlay. Exile up to 5 target creature cards from graveyards, and opponent separates those into 2 piles. It's kind of like a graveyard factor fiction, so you can end up with a really good pile on your side, or you can grab some more of a utility pile. Either way, it's just nice to grab 5 creatures spread out from anybody's graveyards and end up with a bunch of creatures on the battlefield. It's kind of a little expensive at 7 mana, but hey, you're here to have some fun in Singleton, and it's definitely a great way to have some fun. Now, one of the ways that we can really take advantage of kind of creatures dying is going to be Open the Grave. So we get this down for 5 mana. Whenever a non-token creature dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So if we're building that Aristocrats deck I've been talking about, we sacrifice a creature. Let's say that we sacrifice Doomed Dissenter. We're going to get a 2/2 zombie from Doomed Dissenter. Then, at the same time, with Open the Graves, we're going to end up with another 2/2 zombie on the battlefield. So this is kind of a great way to really get a ton of extra value out of us sacrificing our creatures. Rite of Bells and Locks, technically not really some sort, it doesn't really care about creatures dying, but we're going to give us a ton of options for creatures to sacrifice. So that Chapter 1, Chapter 2, we're going to end up with 2 black cleric creature tokens. Then that third chapter, I end up with a 6/6 demon. That's going to keep us on point with the Liliana's Contract card that we're running in here too. So if you're running some sort of card advantage and a couple different demons, this is a great way to get those creatures to sacrifice and end up with an extra demon to hopefully kind of work towards that alternative win condition. Plus, it's always nice to end up with a bunch of clerics. The art on those tokens looks so good. I love it. Now, on to the kind of some of the good stuff creatures in here. We're running stuff like Demonic Vigor if you want to run it in your deck. Enchant creature, it's going to get +1/+1. Then whenever it dies, we get to return that creature to our hand. So this is a great way to kind of cheat some sort of spot removal from our opponent for only 1 mana. And then also Abnormal Endurance. This is a great way. Let's say that we have a creature on the battlefield. Your opponent goes for some spot removal. In response to that spot removal, we go for Endurance. It's going to get +2, and then it gains whenever it dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So let's say we have Ravenous Chupacabra. We can go for Abnormal Endurance or Ravenous Chupacabra. We sacrifice Ravenous Chupacabra. That +2 may not really matter at that particular time, but it's a great way for us to get an extra enter the battlefield trigger, or for us to kind of protect our actual commander creature. Some other good stuff is going to be Gruesome Fate. This is definitely going to be one of more of your situational cards. Each opponent loses 1 life for each creature that you control. And the Dead Man's Chest. Whenever an equipped creature dies, exile cards equal to its power from the top of its library, and then we get to cast non-land cards from among them as long as they remain exiled and you spend manas or any color. So this is kind of one of those ways you can put it on one of your opponent's really big creatures, put Dead Man's Chest on there, and then, see what sort of card you can flip out of their chest once you get rid of that creature. And that's going to bring us to the end of the kind of mono black good stuff spells. Like I mentioned, these are, you don't necessarily need to pick up every single card. If one of these cards really catches your eye, pick it up. Typically the way I do these videos, at the beginning of the video, that's going to be more of your important cards, and then as it kind of drags on, we're going to kind of get into more of the obscure cards. But these are, if you end up buying or spending your wild cards on all of these cards, these are great cards to add to your collection. They'll definitely help you building some of your Singleton Arena deck. So it's going to bring us to the end of the video, and if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.